Good afternoon, and welcome to today's SAMHSA-sponsored webinar titled Peers Making an Impact in Crisis Care, presented on behalf of the National Coalition for Mental Health Recovery. Today's presentation will be recorded, and the recording link, slides, and a certificate of attendance will be sent via email to everyone who attended today. Closed captioning is available and can be viewed by clicking the CC icon at the bottom of your screen or clicking the link in the chat pod to view in a separate window. We also have an ASL interpreter who should be spotlit on your screen. During the presentation, please add your questions and comments in the chat box, and questions will be asked out loud for the presenters to answer at the end of the presentation. When the presentation ends, please take a few moments to complete a brief survey that will show in your browser as you exit the platform. Thank you again for joining, and we will now begin today's presentation.
The objectives of this presentation are to understand the range and scope of peer-run services and their innovative approaches, learn how these services empower individuals with serious mental illness to achieve recovery and wellness, and to recognize the cost-effectiveness and participant perceived benefits of peer-run services as less restrictive, supportive alternatives. Next slide, please. I'd now like to introduce our first presenter. Please welcome Earl Miller.
Hello, can you see me? Okay. Yeah, so next slide. Hi, I'm Earl Miller. I'm from Holyoke, Massachusetts. I've been a peer specialist for about 14 years now, and I won't go into my career because we're going to talk about that. So what is peer support? I shared the SAMHSA definition because that feels helpful. But in my life, what peer support has been the idea that someone can understand the harder parts of my life and how to navigate those. My life has had some significant challenges. I'm somebody with a mental health diagnosis who has spent significant time in hospitals. I've had some negative police experiences. I've experienced homelessness and poverty. And so for me, when I found peer support actually here at the Wildflower Alliance where I am now, what it meant was that I wasn't so alone with those things and that there must be a way to escape that. And the career was great, but that not feeling so alone for me was the most important part. I also think that when we talk about peer support, there can be a bit of a tendency to think of it as a lesser form of intervention, of support. And I don't believe that that is true. I think of peer support more often as a more working class, more kind of grounded in the grassroots of the work, of the idea that nobody is the sum of the worst thing they've ever done. For me, the work has been about hope and moving towards things. But that's a really good definition there as well. Next slide. I always feel like a game show host doing that. So lived experience is a profession. When I found peer support, I very much did not think that this would be the work that I would do. I thought that it would help me and then I would find some other place to be. I am a factory worker by profession before I got here. For me, the three main pieces of that are modeling resilience and the very nature of recovery. I'm going to talk a little bit today about what recovery has looked like for me, but that it isn't a linear path and it looks different for everyone. Advocacy and non-coercion. So I, as someone who has experienced the mental health system for a very long time, was often most troubled by the reality that I would be in team meetings and I would be outnumbered on my own team, which is someone who has played team sports is not an experience I ever had there. And it's really challenging to be outvoted on your own life. And so part of peer work is advocating with a person and not necessarily even for them. And non-coercion. I was taught a model of peer support that relies heavily on enthusiastic consent. The idea that folks should want to work with me, that they should understand what I can cannot, and what my limitations are, and that should be a very specific part of our relationship from the very beginning. And so that advocacy partnered with that non-coercion are also piece to this. And then change agent. The idea that the mental health system has often been shaped by its most challenging moments, and that has sometimes meant missing out on opportunities to support folks to make meaning of their own experience. And so some of my experience has been working in state mental health or municipal government and trying to work with decision makers and policymakers to think differently about what a mental health challenge can be, or emotional distress can be, or trauma, and understanding that as you set policy, if you don't hold the reality of those things, you may miss out on opportunities to empower folks and to help them to understand what the world looks like for them. Next slide. So what recovery looked like for me. I entered into the foster care system when I was 12. Very quickly during that experience, I became suicidal, which to me made sense. I had very quickly lost my family, been injected into a family that was very clear with me that I was a part of their income, that having me there was a part of supporting the household. So I didn't necessarily feel like a person so much as as money coming in. I from 12 to 18 spent probably more than half of that time in hospitals, residentials, group homes, or shelters. And I became very dependent on them. When I turned 18, what I had learned through the system was that negative emotions were something to be kind of managed with medication. And I understand that's true for some folks. And in fact, it is true for me sometimes. But that really led me into having a bit of a substance use challenge because I did not know how to feel my feelings without finding some escape from them. So I went into rehab when I was 18. I found 12-step, but I continued to struggle and I continued to have significant suicide attempts and really life-interrupting challenges. At 21, I became homeless, which lasted for a 3-month period. I slept under the bench of a local park, and it was a really scary period of my life. What the system had told me about myself was that I should not take on large responsibilities. And I think that that was intended in a very protective way. But actually, what changed things for me was the two people you see in this picture. Becoming a father. When my youngest child was born, the one I'm holding there, I became a stay-at-home dad for 2 years. And it forced me to learn to deal with my feelings because there was no escape from hard moments, and being a dad was very challenging for me. It forced me to look for supports and look for resources and face myself and understand who I was. And I'm so glad that I did, not just because I love those children very, very much. The big one is 17, the little one is 14. But I also that's what recovery looked like for me, was going from being someone who needed to be helped to someone who was responsible for. And that was the thing that pushed me into finding the Wildflower Alliance, where I volunteered for 7 months and really was mentored by really experienced folks. I'm someone who comes into the work with no college education and really found my path through doing it. So what recovery looked like for me is it was messy. There were days that I very much did not feel recovered. And there are days now where I don't feel that. But having children for me, and those are my only children, really shifted my sense of where I stood in the world, and in a lot of ways grounded me to the world. So I don't know that there's any recovery practice that would tell you to go have kids, and I don't know that I would say that, but for me, it got me there. I am talking really fast. I'm sorry, interpreter. I will do better. Next slide. So peer support, an evolving field in my journey. My work started here at the Wildflower Alliance. During that time, I founded Finding Shelter Through Peer Support, a wraparound housing support rooted in peer support values and ethics. Following that, I worked at the state-funded Community Behavioral Health Service through the Center for Human Development, a local nonprofit. After that, I worked at the Western Mass area of the Department of Mental Health, the State Department of Mental Health. And then was the founding director of the Community Responders for Equity and Safety and Service, an innovative alternative to police department, which was a co-equal branch with police and fire. And then I find myself back at Wildflower, which feels like a nice full circle. Next slide, please. The Bowen Resource Center is where I started my work. That is our new location. We are in a busy residential neighborhood in Springfield, Mass. We offer a variety of resources. People call in and we support them. We have computers. We have peer specialists on site who are able to meet with folks. We have a library, which is really run through donations. So we have a variety of offerings. We have a gym, a shower, a food pantry. We do trainings, workshops. Every day we do a check-in meeting. We make our decisions through a community meeting, and a host of other activities. We're starting a movie club. We have lawyers come in and offer legal advice and help folks to clear their records with record sealing. Mostly, though, it's a community space and it holds people who are a community together. The majority of the folks who come there currently are unhoused, but we get folks from all over. And I would tell you that in my 14 years being around that center, I've never seen a significant act of violence. Folks have surprised me on an everyday basis. I showed up there in a really vulnerable place, and I'm really proud to be able to continue to support people there. We believe that the folks who come there come with the answer to their challenges, and our job is really to support them to find the wisdom and value in their own experience. And it's a really sacred place for me. It's named after Shelley Bowen, who was a part of the Wildflower Alliance guiding council at the beginning and insisted that we have this center in a very busy area. And we will see 100 to 140 people there just about every day, every week. We're open Tuesday through Saturdays. Next slide. Finding Shelter through Peer Support. So while I was at Wildflower Alliance the first time, I think this was 2015. I'm aging myself, I know. We found ourselves in a bit of a budget. It was 2014. Wow. We found ourselves in a bit of a budget issue, and our governor at the time had said that programs that had housing programs would be exempt from those budget cuts. So kind of got to work. So the program we started initially was around eviction avoidance, helping folks to avoid ending up in evictions. We started out really as a community program. It was largely just my cell phone. I would go to the housing court and meet with lawyers and judges and anyone who would meet with me to understand the housing landscape. Massachusetts has a very specific set of housing laws that may not be representative of everywhere. That building right there is the Rainville. It's was founded with an old HUD grant that does not exist and has not existed for a while. That was used to repurpose distressed buildings in urban centers. And so that used to be the Hotel Rainville, which was a not great spot that the city kind of wanted to get rid of. And what they did was they created a apartment building. It's SRO, single occupant spaces, for people who were homeless or unhoused. I use those words interchangeably. When I describe my experience, I use the language of homelessness. When I describe other folks' experience, I largely say unhoused. I think the differences are really personal for folks. So I just wanted to explain that discrepancy. When we got there, so there are 42 units there. When we got there, 40% of the units were getting evicted every year. The building had some of the lowest health insurance rates in the state, despite having Mass Health having existed before the larger insurance programs. There were folks who needed CNA services who were not able to access it. Are we changing interpreters? I'll pause for a second. All right. I'm going to tell my people I tried. Thank you. There were conflicts between tenants. What we did there was largely what we do at the center. We tried to create community there. So when we did the health insurance enrollment, we actually found that the entire street was not using it, had a low utilization rate of insurance. And so we got the whole street insurance. We reduced the eviction rate to 0% for 3 years by mediating between the property management and the folks staying there. The things we did were felt to me like very working class organizing principles of if one person had a conflict, we use that to teach everyone about the conflict. We connected resources, we brought in health services, and then we allowed folks to interview them and be the kind of decider. Um, I think the folks there would say that we improved the quality of life, and the property management certainly appreciated us being there to keep things from getting too tense. Next slide. So working for the Department of Mental Health, which happened after I left Wildflower the first time, well, the only time, I was the director of recovery. And so what that meant was that I was a part of the senior leadership team for the area. I was a part of incident reporting groups. I did consultations with providers. But in the office is where I think things were most impactful. So helping case managers who are working with folks to think about the impact of their decisions, to have them an increased understanding of what it was like to live in a group home and why a person may and may not make that decision. Earning trust through disclosure. Clinicians were very wary of disclosing even what felt like mundane things. If they were working with someone with the kid, if you have the kid saying, I understand what it's like to be a parent, can be a real paradigm shift. And then increasing peer support in the culture, in the resilience with the team and the people served, understanding that life is hard for everyone, and taking things that happened in the office and giving them a wider context for the team. And when policy decisions were made, serving as an advisor to the decision maker there from a lived experience place. What does it mean to be in the hospital for a long time? What does it mean to have your decisions made as kind of part of routine insurance decisions? And really, my hope and my goal, and I think I accomplished this to some degree, was to help both sides of the table see that they were there, but for the twists and turns of life, that a lot of the people we served would have made fine clinicians, and that a lot of the folks in the office had real challenges in their lives. They had the benefit of having folks who were able to support them through it in the moment. Next slide. Alternative crisis response. So I was at DMH through the pandemic, through the early part of the pandemic, and in the area of the world I live in Massachusetts, there was a somewhat high-profile police shooting that really motivated me to want to be involved in the shift in first responder approaches. So CRESS was formed by the community. It was overseen by a community group. In that role, I was on par with the police chief and fire chief. I was hired alone and needed to hire a team. I chose a peer model, because I'm a peer specialist, and it would have been really weird for me to choose another one. But also because it allowed us to hire folks who represented the community in a lot of ways. Some of those being identity ways, but a lot of those being folks who had lived in the community, folks who had experienced both good and bad interactions with first responders, and using that as a platform. Our training consisted of intentional peer support, motivational interviewing, which is a really wonderful framework as long as the intent of it is good and that it still looks for that consent. Supporting folks from different backgrounds. So we brought in people from communities to train our folks. People with autism trained us on working with folks with autism. People with physical disabilities taught us about that. And really making sure that the work reflected the folks who were going to be served by it. And then all the trainings associated with a regular 911 response, right? I always remind folks that 911 involves calling your local government, the people responsible for potholes and property taxes. And if folks are going to take that risk, you sure do got to make it very comfortable. We were the fastest department in the country to deployment. From my hiring to our first service delivery was 6 months. Most of that was in the hiring process. Um, the fluidity and speed of the training for the folks meant that they didn't need a lot of time to build empathy. We gave them the information, but they immediately understood the impact that their training could have on folks, which was speedy. In the year that I was there, we did a little over a year I was there while we were actively deployed. We did 1,000+ calls for service. We worked with, and so those were individual calls for things like folks missing, folks with dementia who had wandered off, interpersonal conflict, mediation, accessing resources, and we engaged with 8,000 residents, which depending on where you live might not feel like a big number, but there's only 40,000 people in Amherst, so that's a pretty big one. And during that time, we did not need to call the police once. I am not anti-police. Mental health calls are a particular challenge for police, and one that I think the large majority of that field would agree they would be better served if there was a more equipped group that could tackle their plate. Next slide. Why peers in public safety? Public safety is a feeling. We all define it and score it on our own experiences. What may feel safe for me may not feel safe for another person. And so when we talk about public safety, having a wide range of options for folks allows people to make informed decisions about who's going to support them. Understanding what emotional distress looks like for folks matters. The ways in which some people cry and some people rage and some people get quiet and some people get big mattered. And understanding that just because it works for me doesn't mean it will work for you was very important. Like I said, current models put a lot of burden on police and fire services. Police have a responsibility to wrap calls up quickly. Our average call time was at least 2 hours, likely closer to 3. And so it allowed other folks to stay in their rotations. And the time in training for follow-up aftercare preventative work. So when we met with someone on a call, we made it very intentional that we were going to reach back out and see if they wanted to meet again. And then we reach out later to make sure that their needs had been met. And if we understood that for some folks, calling 911 was a part was really about getting resources and feeling heard, how could we meet them where they were and do that without the need to call 911? So largely it was about that. Next slide. The Wildflower Alliance approach, which really has informed my entire career, is around these 4 ideas: validating that what folks are experiencing is real for them, and that it has to be okay for them to share those experiences if you're ever going to move through the distressing pieces of it. Curiosity, what's going on for folks matters, and asking questions allows us to avoid making assumptions and juxtaposing our own worldview on folks. Vulnerability, it is easier for a person to share hard things with someone who is also willing to share hard things. And we know that that's natural because things like 12-step have existed for over or close to 100 years. And then engaging the broader community. These things do not happen in isolation. One of the challenges I particularly found out about the hospital was that I'm having a really hard time, and the answer of removing me from the community does not stop my problems from piling up. It just takes me out of the equation. And when I come back, there may be resentment from the folks who are around me. There may be things that I missed. And I'm not necessarily in a better position to address those things. So engage this community and then thinking of ourselves as bridges. We are helping folks to move through their community. We are not saving them. Next slide, please. Systems benefits of peer support, focusing on partnering help reduces kind of reoccurring challenges. Unarmed and non-coercive nature avoids escalating situations, allows people an advocate to ensure that providers understand what's happening, and having someone who can sometimes translate a person's experience to the language of our existing structures. models ways of navigating hardship and life and all the things that we all get from community and real relationships. Next slide, please. It won't always feel this way. So when I turned 13 in a psych ward, and that was the day I found out that my mother had left the state. And the person who was most helpful for me that day was probably the worst staff on the unit, a guy who would come in and read his paper in a corner all day. And while I was sitting in an isolation room, he came in and said a thing that I've carried my entire life, which is, it won't always feel like this. And that to me has carried everything for me. I can deal with anything because it'll feel different someday. I just want to know in that statement, he didn't promise me that it would feel better. He didn't promise me that it would happen soon. He didn't promise me that that I wouldn't have to do work. He just promised me that if I endured this moment, there would be another one after. And that is the most profound thing in my entire life. And that is me and my kid at Disney. And for a guy like me who didn't get to go very many places, that is a moment I'm proud of. Next slide, please. Why hope matters. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I hope this is fairly intuitive. But what I will say is often folks in systems that are restrictive for whatever reason, it's hard to think of what life will look like beyond this. And part of the human condition is a need to believe that there's a better day that might come. And being in the system or having mental health challenges, you still need to believe that there will be a better day. And I believe that in my core. Next slide, please. All right, that is the end of my time. I'm going to pass it back to Maureen. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Earl. I'd now like to introduce our second presenter, Juliet Buritica. Next slide.
Thank you, Maureen. Hello, everyone. I'm Juliet Buritica, and I've been working at Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey since 2018. CSPNJ is a peer-led agency and has been operating for 40 years. I oversee our peer-run respite services and 2 mobile crisis outreach response teams in New Jersey. I'm a peer who's diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I am also a survivor of domestic violence and childhood abuse. I have found the work we do at CSPNJ and Respite extremely meaningful and valuable. Today, I will be talking to you about this valuable service that we have in New Jersey. Our peer-run respites have been up and running since 2014, and in a couple of minutes, I will be discussing our mission, vision, and the process of respite services. Next slide, please. Peer-run respites are an alternative to an inpatient psychiatric hospitalization. Respites help instill a sense of hope when a person experiences emotional distress or a crisis. Respite services were created by people in New Jersey who had lived experience, who strongly advocated for peer-to-peer support that could be a warm, home-like environment where people can feel accepted and not judged. Since then, we have been fortunate to have 3 peer-run respites. Next slide. Here is a picture of the 3 homes that we have in New Jersey. Next slide, please. Our mission at Respite is to instill a sense of hope, empowerment, and self-determination. We believe that fostering recovery and wellness helps develop valued life roles. Next slide. You will begin to hear me say the word guest. At CSPNJ, we use language that is strength-based. We use language that is encouraging and empowering. Our respite vision is to provide guests with support and tools that can help foster wellness and recovery. Next slide. At Respite, we demonstrate support by using values such as hope, respect, dignity, integrity, resiliency, genuineness, empathy, and compassion. Next slide. Our goals at Respite are to really empower our guests to reestablish healthy habits and routines, enhance coping skills to manage unpleasant experiences, provide emotional support, help strengthen self-care to resume valued life roles and responsibilities, assist guests with the needs and resources they need in the community, Develop encouragement in a peer-based setting. Next slide. Next, I will be talking about how we view wellness in crisis at Respite Services. Next slide. We view wellness as the presence of purpose in life, involvement in work and play, joyful and safe relationships, healthy body and living environments, and the presence of happiness. Next slide. At Respite, we ask our guests about their current self-care routine. We ask questions regarding their sleep, rest, relaxation, nutrition, physical activity, and any medical or substance use concerns. Through support and wellness activities, we really aim to help restore balance when they return home in their valued roles and in the community. Next slide. The foundation of exploring our guests' wellness is using the 8 dimensions of wellness. Since our guests develop their own goals, we begin by kindly asking how satisfied they are in each dimension. The 8 dimensions of wellness consist of financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, intellectual, environmental, and emotional wellness. This helps us understand which dimension the guest needs the most support in. We believe that guests are the experts of their own lives, and we encourage them to decide what is important to them. Next slide. At Respite, we view crisis from the lens of wellness, and we believe that it gives our guests an opportunity for personal growth. We believe that a crisis is short-term, and the importance of our approach must demonstrate that a person can grow and change. We also are intentional that our service offers our guests a sense of belonging to help foster growth and connection. Developing this non-judgmental and accepting environment allows our guests to be aware of the crisis, aware of their habits and routines, and the ability to make their own decisions. Next slide. At Respite, we know of the importance of being trauma-informed. Being trauma-informed really helps us engage with people who may experience trauma, help us to recognize the impact of traumatic events from a present-focused and strength-based approach, offer choices to help empower our guests, and explore what happened to them versus what's wrong with them. Next slide. In my final section, I will be talking about the respite process we use for the people that we serve. Next slide. So at Respite, we receive most of our referrals from mental health agencies and from word of mouth. The process is very simple. Our respites are open 24/7, 365. Therefore, anyone experiencing emotional distress or a crisis can call for immediate support from a peer at any time. After respite services are explained over the phone, and if the caller is interested, we begin the admission process over the phone. All admissions are voluntary, which means it has to come from the person seeking services. After gathering more information from the caller, we will schedule transportation anywhere in the state of New Jersey. Next slide. Here are some pictures of what the respite looks like. Each respite is in a residential area. They have 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a washer and a dryer, and light gym equipment. We also have a recreational space for guests to read, do art, and create music. Each respite has access to computers and Wi-Fi, and the homes are located nearby apart. Our respites are also co-ed, and our guests are welcome to invite visitors during their stay. Guests are able to step out of the respite as often as they want, whenever they would like to step out. Our website actually has 2 virtual tours of our respites. Next slide. Okay, we serve 5 individuals at a time for 10 days. Guests have the option to come for a stay at the respite or do it from the comfort of their home, which is called intensive outreach service, which is also 10 days. And the guests can receive that emotional support over the phone, or staff can visit the guests at their home or in the community. Either service, the 10-day service, guests meet with a peer daily to work through emotional distress and crisis. At Respite, guests are welcome to participate in creative gatherings and share community meals with peers and other guests. After their 10-day stay or intensive outreach service, they're offered follow-up services for 30 days, which I will be explaining it in a moment. Since we are state funded, the service is at no cost to our guest. Next slide. At Respite, we offer our guests emotional support 24 hours a day, which means we're fully staffed all day long. In addition, we offer linkage and advocacy with community resources, develop a wellness plan using the 8 dimensions of wellness, develop and enhance coping skills, create warm transfers and resources for self-help programs, connecting guests to community wellness centers, crisis awareness and creating balance, and offering our guests the choice to create a wellness recovery action plan and or a psychiatric advance directive towards the end of their stay. Next slide. Using the 8 dimensions of wellness, we collaboratively create a wellness plan. This typically includes information from initially the call, identified goals that are created by the guest, and these goals aim to overcome the current crisis or emotional distress and plan for recovery. Next slide. After their 10-day stay or intensive outreach, we offer guests to continue to be supported by peers for 30 days. During the follow-up service, we call daily to offer support over the phone or in the community. We help maintain those linkages to community resources, and we continue the development and enhancement of their wellness goals. Next slide. So here's where our respites are located on the New Jersey map. I want to thank you for your time, and now I will be sending it back to our host. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. I'd now like to introduce our final presenter, Peggy Swarbrick. Next slide, please.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Well, I'm so excited. I just want to have everybody in the chat, like the innovations and excitement of what we just heard from Earl and Juliet. Like someone who's older like me, I'm aging myself, would not have heard about all these amazing kind of things that Earl walked you through, Juliet's walked you through. And I want everybody just to put into the chat what really is inspiring, because hearing all that's going on up in Massachusetts, what Earl had shared with us, it's like mind-blowing in a sense, because we did not have this many years ago. And it took a lot of work for people. So, and also with Juliet. So like in the chat, what's like in, anybody is, I mean, I see some really good things, but really inspiring to hear, or if others want to just kind of really put into the chat what excites you about this, because I'm excited to hear it, even though I see a lot of this stuff. It just warms my heart to know that this happened. So those of you who are there saying, we need this here, we need this there, it's possible, because we were saying this in New Jersey 30 and 40 years ago. CSP started 40 years, we're going to be here. So we made it happen. We all can make it happen. So really exciting to hear this. And just want to have everybody just take a little pause between I go into some of the maybe sort of boring kind of stuff, but hopefully not, it's so boring. Because I want to highlight the innovations of this, bringing out the needs. We heard the needs and creating something that's meeting needs and it's flexible. So what really exciting, put it in, share it, and it's possible. It all is possible. We think there's we overcame a lot in those years. We can still overcome this and create these innovations. So what I'm going to do here now in this last phase is kind of try to bring some of this together for us to know about the idea of innovations, that this is an innovation, but there's a little data behind it, because not even a little, there's a lot. And I want to highlight some of it for you. For those of you who need to speak to the people who are going to help fund you, they want to hear about data. We hear the anecdotal, wonderful things, but where we bridge that. So we'll move into the next slide. I just want to remind us, again, I'm doing this little what peer-run services are. The peer support we heard with Earl describing that and giving that defining, kind of seeing what the service array looks like. But I want to remind us the definition. You know, they were really the result of this movement, the movement we want to keep going. We want to keep that, I think Earl used the word grassroots. We have to keep that grassroots piece moving this along to kind of keep creating these important resources. And I think that what we know is that they provided for many people, they can provide a complement to traditional. So it's not that you don't have to, they're going to wipe away other kind of services. They can be a complement, but for some people, they are an alternative. So it's nice to have something that can do both. And when I'm highlighting, I'm showing you a very old paper, I could share it with you, that of some research that we did back a long time ago, that there a flexible supportive environment. In this paper I'm referencing in this, and I'm going to highlight for it, really got some good data that we used here in New Jersey to kind of keep building some of our programs here. So the two programs I'm going to highlight some data from, next slide, are what Juliet had, some of the data is from some of the respites that we've collected, but also some data that we collected from they were self-help centers at the time. They're currently called wellness centers, but they've evolved to community wellness centers. So I'm going to highlight some of this data so we can just see evidence of what we've heard, and then just get everyone inspired to think about how do you build that in your local spaces and places. So the first one, we heard about respites. I'll go to that in a minute. I'm going to highlight community wellness centers for us. The next slide. These are a place that CSP has had since the mid or 1980s, and we currently operate 15 of them statewide, peer run, and there's 3 on the grounds of state psychiatric hospitals that are peer run. And they've evolved the name over time. They are originally drop-in centers, but through some evolution of needs and changes, they became self-help, and then eventually wellness centers are they named. So they have elements of drop-in, they have elements of self-help, but they've now expanded the focuses. And a lot of them sound a lot like, I believe it was the Bowen Center that Earl referenced. A lot of things that happen there are very similar to many of the centers we operate. They're place that create a warm, welcoming space and place that's really critical for people, where people can gain skills, gain the support, counteract that loneliness, and really help people look at their wellness. And that's what they do across the different dimensions: physical, spiritual, social, intellectual, occupational, environmental, financial. They really look at people holistically, and they really help people to think about wellness and help to support people in that. So that's just to give you a little definition. You can learn about them more on the website. And the next slide is going to highlight at the center, these 15 in the community, 3 in the state psychiatric hospitals. They're an environment where people can feel accepted and respected. Very important concepts for all of us in all of our lives, especially today. We want to feel accepted. We want to feel respected. They play a big role in people's day-to-day life to do that in the environment that they provide. It could be the physical environment and the social environment context they'll provide. They provide for many people, as we heard in Earl's wonderful story of the stepping stone that they foster for so many people to be able to move towards our wellness in so many other spheres of the dimensions of wellness. They can help people find access to resources, tools that are available within themselves and in their community. And they're just what happens is, because people who are running them and operating have lived experiences, they get that support from people who have that. And a big one is counteracting that loneliness and isolation that is far too often really important, impacting the quality of life of people so much. So what we did when I want to highlight this concept of environment that I think both respites and centers do, there's what they call social environment. The next slide will highlight it for you. The social environment, so not just the physical, because sometimes the physical environment in some of these places are just like, oh my God, they're not the greatest spaces and places because the rents are real high. But the people in the settings create a social environment that far outdoes the physical environment, maybe not being as conducive as they would want. they make the social environment a place and a space where people feel. So there's that relationship aspect of the social environment that really is powerful in the peer support relationship. They help with that personal growth in that environment. And they also run, you heard what Earl said about, they don't just say, we're going to do this, this, and this. They have a meeting to kind of run it by the members' needs. Am I part of making the order and the structure of this place, or can I help innovate it to meet the need? So we are part of the decision making and what's done here in the center, what are happening here. People are feeling their voices saying. So this is what this concept of social environment, these are factors in the environment that the centers do a lot of work on. And so in the centers, when I did some studying of them many years ago, and I think a lot of this data, next slide, will come true, we found out, okay, I found out some scales that looked at how satisfied people were as well as how empowered they were. And in this data that I had was with quite a number of our centers back in the day, there we found that there was a significant relationship about people's perception of this factor of the personal growth that it provided, the relationships, and their satisfaction. People really felt they were more satisfied when they felt the positive relationship. They were part of the decision making. So we found that the really important that when we look at the social relationship, the amount of cohesion, the support, the people allowed to express themselves, people are more satisfied in this environment. The extent to which people can have involvement in the decision making, the order, the control, the innovation that's happening, a lot more satisfaction. So we really want to be reminded of not only we have these great services of peer support, but how they're operated from the peer lens, from the peer values that we heard in both. So important. So people really felt more satisfied in these environments where they can create these relationships connected to fellow peers and were encouraged to express themselves. So there's strong data. You can go back to the articles. I don't want to go into bog us down with the data, but that's what we found in this data. The next one was empowerment, because we wanted to see in the next slide how they were empowered and how much they promoted empowerment. And one of the things we found in some of this data, we found a lot of the data, and I'm going to tell you, this study was done by, this was part of my doctoral work. I trained a whole bunch of peer leaders in the state and trained them in the protocols, and they went out and gathered the data. So I didn't do it myself. They gathered that, we analyzed it and did, the statistics on that. And what we found when we had this, people completed this, that like involvement or the dose of involvement really, really predicted a lot of people's feeling more empowered. So when people were being involved more at a better dose of that, people who were involved a lot more had a sense more of empowerment. So not to say you want to keep people in programming for long term, but you do see people who stay with it and are involved. Again, was brought up the 12-step program. They can be lifelong things where people can keep coming back and involved. And we do know the research on that. So there was definitely that. And also, again, some anecdotal data from the data to here on the next slide, that people really were feeling very important, where they felt that they were, there was a lot of things that people said that they felt not so lonely, they didn't feel so isolated, they provided that engagement for people. So they're playing that important need, these wellness centers in these environments, similar to what it was said, the Bowen Center, the community wellness centers in New Jersey, many of you may have them. They provide this social connection, this social environment, so important for people. And there's many other data we can find for them, but I think you've got the point. They're powerful. And I'm going to now shift into the data on the respites. So we've also collected data, the next slide, on the respites. So we regularly have someone doing good satisfaction who's not a staff or connected to it. People really asking regularly the guests. In this data set, we always collect it, but I wanted to share a data set that we had published in a paper. And that's the other thing, getting papers out there around this helps. So this is a paper that was done by our COO, Anne, and others are here. You can look at the next slide with it. There was, we can go back to the previous one. That will show you the slide there, where if you want to get the paper. But we found that people felt positively. You know what? It's not 100%. You're never going to get 100%. But many people felt that the quality was excellent. Many people felt that the service was good. So a high number really were saying positive things pretty generally about it. They're feeling satisfied with it. They feel it's helping them. And they feel like, again, 70 is highest of this number. They felt their opinions were valued where they were being involved. They really felt very, very strongly about this. So this is some quantitative, and the paper can go into some more about that, but I want to highlight a little bit about the qualitative data. Next slide. People were asked about these 3 questions, and we did a team of us that were outside of the team that's doing the services at Westwood analyzed all that data to see what was most helpful during this day. What would you think was beneficial, and what other things do you think could be improved? And what we found was this: the space, the planning process, and the services and support, getting back to that social environment component. So the next slide shows you the space. Many base felt the value of reported that space, a clean, safe, home-like environment provided that opportunity for relaxation. So he gave you some examples of what they said. You know, it was like a regular house. The place was welcoming, not institutional, no gates or security. Those things can be really triggering for people. Availability of normal living situation provides me a security and safety. So really seeing that space, you can see some of these quotes, and in the paper, there's a few more. The next slide will highlight for you that wellness planning process that Juliet referred to. This is a way, now people do treatment planning. It can be good or not so good, but this planning intentionally to support people in an empowering way is to see what are people wanting right now to work through this emotional dysregulation that's happening, to help really figure out what we can do to help you right now, and through a series of conversations and discussions, coming up with a plan and helping them to create a plan together that they can help get through this period. And then again, following up, staying on, moving forward, we can help them. Again, we saw there's a follow-up period. So here, staff helped me create a spreadsheet to get organized. Wouldn't believe all the areas that helped me to handle the work I needed to do. Really just helping people to put it out there, understand what's important, and then step by step work through it. So this wellness planning process was a big important piece for many of these people that we provided this valuable data to us. The other piece was about the services and support that people said on the next slide, where they felt that they felt the availability of that peer support, the assistance with the connections to the community resources. They were just seen as so helpful for so many people. And then there were things that happened. Now, they don't do programming per se. They meet the needs of the folks that are there. There's resources there, like rooms for kind of meditation type things, physical activity kinds of things, all kinds of different things, depending on the members, the guests that are coming in, there's needs. So it's just really having that service, having that support, having that environment there, being able to talk to people when you feel anxious. Again, that was reference to what Juliet said, the availability to be there at all hours to have someone to talk to. The morning meditations and yoga that were offered now, they may not do this all the time, but if the guests want that, that's available to them. The board games, I know I hear a lot about the board games being something that people really like, that having that, the movies, the dinner nights, the community events can be things that all were very important. And so people found that it was really important to have activities, and people often found that to have more types of activities. Now, I point you in this slide here that on this slide, you can get that paper. We have it, we can reach out to us. It's available. When we published it, we made sure it was available in public domain. So there's a way, it's called open access. So we had, because people will always write a paper and then nobody can get it. But we intentionally wrote that paper, and we made it we were able to pay some money to be able to have it available to people. So we can get that one to you. And I also want to highlight another paper that we also have available to you that's called Peer Run Respite Approaches to Supporting People in Experiencing Emotional Crisis. It's another paper available again. We'll put it into a chat. You can, or you can go right onto there and get it on the websites, because it's also available. That really highlights the peer-run respite in particular, and it highlights a lot of the data we highlighted that I just briefly mentioned over, but it really highlights why and how the peer crisis response can be so effective for people in terms of the goal of crisis respond, as you heard, how whatever the focus on the wellness, as Juliet mentioned, how trauma is viewed, the approach to trauma-informed work. Someone put in the chat, what kind of training do people do? ECPR training. That's definitely something we try to get staff trained in, ECPR, emotional CPR. And again, the importance of self-determination and power imbalances that operate in peer-operated respite. So that's something, if you want to look at that paper, we have a lot of nice outline in that paper that we can share, that you can look at if you're really looking at crisis response, that can give you some good guidelines around what is the unique features of a peer respite in terms of how the crisis is understood, because then how you approach it becomes different, how you approach the self-determination, and then the idea of being with people rather than doing to people, role of trauma, as well as how relationships, how staff are trained to support, to be attuned with people, and helping people to really help people to listening, using a lot of those good listening skills. So I definitely want to, just wanted, as I did my piece here, was to highlight the value of the innovations of these various programs that we heard about, but particularly the community wellness centers, how they provide this social environment that can be so important to help people be more satisfied and empowered in their life. The respites, really, specifically the data that we have here to just show the benefit of people. And I can tell you, I could go to anecdotal stories of people I know who were in many other services and for many years in and out of those, having a lot of distress in their life, and then going to a respite and then telling me about their experience in the respite, and then telling me that they are not going back to the other services that are often not meeting their needs, how respite really helped them meet their needs and help them really move forward in some goals that they have. There's numerous stories we can share with you about that, but for this time, we just wanted to be able to have questions for people, and thank you for the opportunity to share a lot about these programs we have here at Collaborative Support Programs in New Jersey, and you learn about the great work that's happening up in Massachusetts too.
Thank you, Peggy. We now have time for questions. If you have a question, please enter it in the chat. We've gotten a couple of questions already. One of them was, is peer respite similar to the living room in other areas? Does anybody know?
Peggy, did you want to answer that?
No, you're the person for this one, please.
Go ahead, Peggy.
You can go, Juliet. Yeah. You do, or do you want to go?
Oh, yeah, no, I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, so there's some similarities, but they're not quite they're not the living room. The living room model is often, depending on the state where it is, it's often connected closely with maybe an ER kind of a setting and things. The places that we have here in New Jersey, in the rest, many of the respites are more like in the community outside of that, and there's not a real link to that. As even Juliet said, we don't even get many referrals from those ER kind of places in a sense. So the living room often is there. We do have one or two living rooms, I think, in New Jersey, but they're much more connected to the ER connections. I'm not sure if that's similar for you, Earl, in your state.
Yeah, our living room programs here are tied to crisis programs. And so they I think the intention of them is to have a peer space, but largely what they serve as is kind of a waiting room for crisis services, which is meaningful for folks.
Okay, thank you. Autumn would like to know about funding long-term. She has funding in place to start program, but concerned about long-term when it's not that shiny new project.
Yeah, well, it's I'm going to tell you from the beginning of our work of $65,000 for 3 wellness centers and running some kind of education and programming way back when to you never know for sure, but you got to start somewhere. So long term, you want to always have a long-term planning, but if you do have resources and you can get startup, don't hold that back with you. Maybe the state we may have the budget crisis, right? Always could be budget crisis going to happen. But you can plan with your board or with your organization to plan for that. But I'm just going to say we took a lot of risks. There's a lot of risks sometimes, and there's risks in all of life. So be planful about it. Start to maybe one of the things we're encouraging is like look for philanthropic. There's a lot of people who want to give some resources to this important resource that you have family members who have family that could have benefited from this. So keep your eyes open, not on your typical state, and because if you do beyond just the state and the other kinds of federal things, you're sometimes a little boxed into stuff. But if you can open it up and try to find a donor of someone and get a donor base to want to create a pool of resources, is going to help you to keep your model as pure and flexible as possible, and it will really help more of the innovations.
We have another question, somewhat similar, but with different facets. January Abel asked, I may have missed it, but how is this funded? Are you able to bill medical assistance? Is this a per diem amount?
So I'll say it, Wildflower Alliance. Well, so the state was obviously the state. The Mass DMH is the largest funded DMH in the country. They're about a $1.2 billion organization. The CREST was funded by the town and had a matching grant from the state. So it was about 1.2, 1.3 million. Wildflower, I think exactly what Peggy said. We have a really diverse funding structure. Our largest source of funding is our state mental health department, but also we take private money. We've been funded by district attorneys. We've partnered with lots of folks. We do trainings, so that's a revenue stream that allows us both to train folks, but also to take money in. We do have a donor base that we're always hoping to expand. And I do think just on that last thing, like relationships with donors. Why do people donate money? Why do people give you money? Are you taking money for things that you can do long term? Is this a 1-year program that's going to be hard to sustain? And I think that largely that means making steps and then pausing to sustain and then taking another step. I think at the beginning, folks can get so anxious to move that they can avoid the really important lessons of each step of the way.
Thank you. We have another question. Would it be similar to an Oxford House?
No, it's not. Oxford House is a specific model for substance use recovery, I believe, and so the respite model is really more like people who are there for 3 to 10 days. It's a just more. It's not like a structured program that way.
Okay, thanks. Another question, what are some of the most important training to get when in this field?
Not as much, not too much training, because training will undo it, in my opinion. Even though I do a lot of training, I feel it undoes people. So training that keeps your authenticity, any training that could help with authenticity and self-growth for you and learning how to listen to people. Like if we could just have good training on listening, you don't need a lot more training than that. Like, well, you need more, there's things, but I think the more training people get, I find that my opinion, old person, 30 something years with this, the more training I see, it taking people away from the roots of what the core work is. But that's my opinion, not anybody else, not the agency's opinion, I don't think.
Julia, I would love to hear what trainings you all do at the respite.
Yeah, absolutely. ECPR, it's very fundamental. We do talk about, because we're state funded, we do have certain expectations of training, but like Peggy said, it's just about having that authentic, genuine, empathetic nature. And so when we hire individuals, having lived experience is the most important number one question that we ask. We also talk about so much about our agency and our core values, which, like Peggy mentioned, like it doesn't come from training. It's like you either have that or you don't. Since we have three, we have three leaders at each respite, and they're very particular of the people that we hire, and that's very essential. But ECPR, I want to say, is like a fundamental training that helps us for ourselves because we have to go through it as well. And then also obviously be able to deliver that compassion and empathy.
I think one of the great things about our field is that there are differing viewpoints. And boy, there was a time where there weren't enough of us to really disagree on anything. Wildflower, we have 4 core trainings. Those are intentional peer support, the hearing voices training, alternatives to suicide, and then we provide an anti-oppression training that is kind of broadly based. My belief at this point in my career is that we talk a lot about training when we really need to talk more about hiring and how we kind of mentor folks into the work. Largely at the centers I work at, the folks we hire will largely be folks who come into the center, volunteer for a period of time, demonstrate a commitment to it, and then are able to come in with the appreciation of the community. I think we have failed as a movement a couple times in trying to create cookie cutter peer specialists, when the reality is the magic of this thing comes from folks bringing their whole self to this thing. And some of the most peer respites don't come if there isn't a particular group of people who at a particular time come up with a specific approach. And so I think sometimes when I am very clear that what I do is art, and I paint my picture the way I paint it, and I wouldn't want someone to think that the way I do it is the way they should do it. I think we're talking more about things like ethics and values and then a framework.
Thank you. Another question is dehabilitation a similar model?
That's very that's a more of a I mean that's more like a provider run kind of a program that's built by certain units of service and things like that. So the centers and the respites aren't run that way.
You would say we are often an alternative to those spaces.
Another question, do you provide food for the guests or is it only when you have special events?
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
Julia, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we definitely have a food pantry for all of our 3 respites. We get donations and our guests feel inclined to want to also donate, which is a beautiful act. So we won't prevent anyone. We do have local stores here in New Jersey that are just so willing to help us out. They know of our service. And we also have community meals, which that's kind of what I mentioned with our gatherings. They love that. I was there actually last Thanksgiving with our guest and just being part of that community piece. And I definitely didn't want to go with my in-laws. I know this is recording, but so I said, hey, no, I'm going to go and spend my Thanksgiving with our guest. And so we do both. And sometimes they collaboratively say, hey, can we get some, for Friday night, watch a movie and have some pizza? And that's what we do. So we do both.
Great. We have a question from Jennifer. Don't you think that one essential element in hiring criteria is that an individual have lived experience or have been through a challenge in life?
I think that's definitional. I think that when agencies have gone a different direction on that, I think it is failed so often as to be the rule. What we do is by definition about lived experience. And I think we see that in places like recovery coaches. In Massachusetts, there's no requirement that you have a substance use challenge to be a recovery coach. And they have not licensed the person who does not have that experience because you're not speaking the language. You don't understand. And what you come to learn about folks who've experienced services is they are very good at sniffing out someone who is inauthentic. You cannot fake what it's like to be a psychiatric survivor, to navigate these systems. I don't think, yeah. So I think when that question has come up, and it has come up a lot in my career in very different settings, I think lived experience is the main ingredient. It's like, you know, how do you make a hamburger without cow? There's a way to do it. That's not really the one I want.
Hey, Stevens, hand up.
I just wanted to add, yeah, similar to Earl, not only respite services, but any service at Collaborative Support Programs of New Jersey. That's in it. That's the number one question we ask. And unfortunately, if someone doesn't, we prioritize obviously lived experience, and not only during the application process, but during the interview process as well. Not only just having it, but are you comfortable in sharing it? Because it's two different things. So we are very, very aware of that piece, just kind of like what Earl mentioned as well.
Another question from Josh. Is there a respite equivalent for involuntary admissions, for example, the Baker Act in Florida?
I would say kind of like lived experience being foundational. Involuntariness is also counterintuitive to the work we do. That if folks are forced in, I just have never seen work work that way. There are in Massachusetts peers on forensic units. There are peer specialists in state hospitals. And to be honest with you, my experience with those folks is that they often struggle with that paradigm of there not being that voluntariness, of not being able to tell a person, hey, you don't have to work with me, especially if you're one of 4 people on the unit. They're going to have to engage with you. So I do think that non-coercion piece, folks may understand it differently, but I think when you get to court-ordered treatment is generally where I haven't seen folks, I haven't seen many things that have been successful.
Yeah, that's very similar with CSPNJ as well. That is something that we definitely 100% stay away. And we've had callers from loved ones that are advocating for, their children, adult children, and we explain the program to them, and then we encourage them. First, we say thank you for, calling and inquiring. However, all of our service are voluntary. Our guests can stay with us up to 10 days, but if they start to feel well on the 6th, 7th day and they want to return back home, they have that option. We still provide them with the follow-up support for those 30 days. Or if they want to continue intensive outreach service, we can easily make that transition for them. So we try to make it as easy, comfortable, smooth, no pressure. And our guests are able to come back 60 days after their last physical stay with us.
Great, thank you. Brian has asked, what do you do with the art created? Do you have art shows? How does that work?
So for our respites, we have a room with painting, creativity. Oh my gosh, the art that we have on our walls. It's just beautiful. I actually took a guest to an Indigenous art show just a few months ago. But at the respites itself, because sometimes our guests don't want to necessarily go out within the first few days of the respite stay. So we want to make sure everything is available for them in the home, available for them. So we do have like painting, like acrylic paint, a lot of mandalas, a lot of coloring as well, or just anything that they would like to express, their art in.
Okay, Joshua has a comment and question. He states, I'm a new peer support specialist for a community health organization in Chicago where we offer behavioral health services, medically assisted treatment, and wraparound services. Being the first one, we are creating a program from scratch. Any advice on the essential things we need to begin with or advice for getting this off the ground?
You're going to be bad at the beginning, so be bad now. Like, don't, I think we get into paralysis by analysis. I think you are going to be not the best when you start. So prepare to not be the best right now and don't wait. Just do it. You'll figure it out. Listen to people around you. In particular, listen to people you're trying to work with. If they say you're doing something that isn't working for them, I think having an agency approach to holding ego, which we all need to have to do the work, but also being able to take critical feedback, because the moment you stop responding to critical feedback, you stop getting it. And the moment you stop getting it, it's over.
I'm just noticing someone has a hand up, so we might want to check on the hand. Hand up.
Okay. Yeah, if the person with the hand up could type their question in the chat, that would be great. Another question, what level of lived experience qualifies a person to say they have lived experience? A couple of sessions with a doctor?
Juliet, I'm so excited to hear how you guys define that.
Yeah, it's whatever comes to mind. I'm really I don't know if it is because the way we're asking the questions, but people are so inclined to share their stories with us. So I don't know if it's because we've made it such a comfortable environment, but they're just saying like, I struggle with anxiety or depression or anything like that. To us, it's, and how they've worked through that and just them being so authentic in that moment. To us, it's so just beautiful to see that. And then along the way, we also share ours as we're interviewing as well. So it's not just a one-way street. And we come out, with the other leaders, just like, oh my gosh, that was so awesome. We get so excited when people are not ashamed of just being so open and expressing what they've been through. And of course, we validate, their experience, and then more comes from that. It's not any different than how we are with our guests. That's really what it is. There is no difference. We're not the experts, but the same thing with staff. It's not just a hat on and off. It's like a role that we take in all the areas, and that's what creates that genuine experience. So with that being said, I mean, I can give you numerous examples since hired a lot of people. But yeah, I'm just very honored to hear people just being so open about their own experiences. And I also share along the way as well, not to the point where I'm making it about myself, of course. It's really it's like in the moment, when the moment is right. It's a gut feeling. I don't know how to explain it, Earl. Maybe you have terms to define it, but it's just and I have a master's degree. That goes in the bag. It's not even important, right? So they just are able to just comfortably share what they've been through.
I think when you ask that question, there's two ways of answering it, which is the actual trauma you had. I think one of the best things Sam Sever did was the 3 E's of trauma, an event that is experienced as traumatic and has an effect. That could be a thing that happens in 2 weeks. It could be a thing that happens over 10 years. I think a person needs to really define that for themselves. But I also think the answer you're getting is, how long does a person have to be in recovery to get into the work? And I do think there are different places that define that. I want to say that 2 year number that is often used would have excluded me. So I started the work, as I started working, I did a RAP training, and in that, all of the trauma of my life came up, and I ended up back in the hospital. If Massachusetts used that rule, I would have been excluded from working in the field until basically when I was starting the housing program. So I think that when we make these inclusionary or exclusionary things, I think we just have to remember that we are going to lose some people who might defy our expectations. Peggy, I'd love to hear from your end of things, like how long do folks need to be in recovery? Is there any sense of that from your research?
Yeah, I don't think there's any research been done on that, and I think it's something you have to come up with, sort of a what I would suggest. I mean, what we've done over the years, people have done over the years. You have to come up with certain norms around it, but not like totally the norms like going to shut somebody out the door. You have to create an opportunity, because sometimes something like you have to be in the hospital, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like it's just too many rules will just bog you down, and you're not going to run a program. and you're going to miss a lot of opportunity for people. I think Andy Bernstein put something in the chat about CSP, like there's so many people, we've had people have all kinds of life experiences, but you don't want to put too much of a number to it. It's really that's not helpful at all. But it would be something not for this call. Maybe people would want to talk offline about it and come up with your own something you feel comfortable in your organization, and your team is doing it similarly, because that's another one. You have this person believes this person believes that, and that could cause dissent in your whole program. You want to come at it from a specific, like a philosophically, but coming at it from a similar way. So I saw something about the youth too. I think one of the things, a promise of like talking about innovations, is youth. Doing more of this with youth is an opportunity, and that people are probably already doing. And I do see my observation, and we have to pull some data on this, is that I find that younger people are really especially the respite program is very much it's like really more attuning to the younger folks. So young adults, it'd be nice if there could be more of this kind of for younger, even kids, myself, who had to go into institutions at 13, didn't have to go into an institutional kind of setting, could have this kind of setting for them. You could really help people at a much earlier age using this approach for youth.
Thank you. Kat asks, do you have issues with striking a balance for serving people who are unhoused in respite services, and what happens when they reach their 10-day limit?
So we're very transparent. We have served folks that are unhoused, and we let them know that it's a 10-day stay. So they know from the initial call. We're very transparent. We don't like I don't like surprises. So I wouldn't want anyone to have a surprise. So we're very, very clear. They have an understanding that they're going to be there for only 10 days. During that time, though, we have other resources. Obviously, we talk about them, and depending on that person, if they are ready, willing, whatever it is, we have, obviously, they tell us, and then we take the next steps. But transparency, and we don't really encounter challenges in that sense. At our agency, we do have warming centers and cooling centers, so we definitely do those warm transfers as well. If the individual wants them, though, it's never something we push. Like I mentioned in my presentation, we're meeting people where they're at. Our agency isn't for everyone because it is a low barrier service. So, which means that we're accepting the individual as they are, wherever they're at. For us, it's very, we just try to be very transparent from the beginning with any service that we have, so they know exactly what we offer.
Thanks. Claudia asks, not sure if this question was asked, but how do you get grants to open a peer-run resource center in a small town like my hometown of Union City, Tennessee?
Yeah, so our resource centers are funded by the state, but actually in the city I operate in, there are resource centers popping up all the time. Some of them are private partnerships with churches. Churches tend to have space, and the biggest issue is where are you going to be? Spaces, local governments, if you have a CDBG process, community development block grants, they're often really receptive to that. The private equity market, the work at the Rainville was funded in large part for a period by a group called the Miller Fund, which is just a family foundation. We went and did an in-person pitch. They gave us $80,000 for 2 years, which really allowed us to find our way. What I would say is there's very expensive grant finding software that often your local library has. So like just asking, and then I would say if you aren't someone who's experienced at grants, find someone in your location who has done something that even has a hint of what you want to do, and go get mentored. Hey, how do you do this? Can I learn? That is the best for me way to do it, because hey, I can tell you how to apply for grants, but I'm in Massachusetts. We have a very specific, right? Massachusetts, there's more resources because we put more money into it. But you may be in a more rural, less kind of top-down approach to funding, and my approach may completely not work for you. So I would say find the folks in your area who are doing it well. And then remember that part of getting that money is negotiating the terms. So some folks may want you to have the police there. We find that having the police at our center creates an environment that isn't conducive to what we want to do, but you may feel different. It may require you to have licensure. It may require you to be certified. It may expose you to inspections or oversight from agencies who you may or may not agree with their foundational approaches. So remember, the money always comes with strings, and you want to make sure that there's strings you can survive. You can tell I worked at government. I have a long answer that says very
No,
little.
that's good. Yeah, it's comprehensive. And we say ditto to a lot of that. And the biggest, and also get students, like having students to help you, students always can help too, like having interns and things like that, because that also can help. They can work on a project and then you never know, they become staff or they could help. Their faculty from the universities could help support things too. So it's a lot of networking.
I would say too, remember that word of mouth matters. The folks who you interact with are going to talk about how their experience, good or bad. And there is no amount of advertising that will overcome bad word of mouth. And funders are listening for word of mouth. Some of our best opportunities have come from folks being at the hospital and saying, hey, I want to go to the Bowen Center. They help me out a lot, which pings the hospital to say, oh, that seems like it's working for folks. Word of mouth is going to serve you everywhere. I just want to answer one question I've seen a bunch, which is peer support in virtual spaces. I'm not involved in this, but Wildflower does have a Discord community that has existed essentially since the beginning of the pandemic. Our website is wildfloweralliance.org. If you go on there, you can see it. It requires staffing just like a community center. It requires people to be present. It requires value setting, goal setting. It's challenging, but it is doable. And I know there are other programs. That's the one I'm most closely aligned with. Sorry.
Yeah, having a virtual options helpful, but I think less or so you have to kind of have a the capacity to do it right, and it can be very helpful for people who are low, in rural areas or have a hard time getting out, being social. And some of our centers are do a lot of support groups that way. Continue, there's some support groups that go on that way that are very successful.
Keith asked, so is 10 days an average for crisis centers to allow?
For our respite service is up to 10 days. That's how we have had it since I believe the beginning. Peggy was in it way before I was. And so that's why I tend to lean on Peggy.
Yeah, and
for those 10 days.
And people do come back eventually, like Julie, you were here already, you can't come back. Nope, that's not the policy. You might come back within a month, they may come back in 6 months, they might come back in 3 years. That's the purpose of it. It's because, if it, it helps people for those little periods, they might need a little bit, they may have needed it. They're just, again, it was sort of that thing, it seemed to be that was a sweet spot of a thing to help people to get back to things. And do sometimes people stay 14 or 15 days? Yes, that happens. Like something happens, they're not like you're out the door, so you have that flexibility, but that's really the average. And it seems like that's worked kind of well, and for the most part. And it was based on a lot of feedback we got and a lot of it took like 4 or 5, maybe 6 or 7 years to even get these things going. When it took like 10 years before to do the advocacy to get the state to fund it. So it does take a little bit of time and effort, but I think we've done a lot of the work in the past. And I think it's more and more you've got a lot of good models, and use the data you hear today to build your case in your local area.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have familiar faces, which that's the purpose, right? If to prevent being hospitalized, and a lot of the times that's their feedback. I'd rather come here than go to a hospital setting. And I know I did put it in the chat, but I did want to state that for our respites, any of them, they're all run the same. 60 days from their last physical stay, they're able to come back again. So, and we build such beautiful rapport with the people we meet. It's like family. So, so we definitely offer that, and we let them know their 10th or whenever they leave, that reminder that if they do need us, one, they can call us at any time because we're staffed 24 hours a day, like I mentioned, 7 days a week, 365. We do not close on holidays. We don't unless it's an unsafe environment, like flooding we did have in one of our respites a few years ago. Just for those reasons, we would, but we still complete outreach over the phone, or we can go visit them out in the community. I actually had the pleasure of doing that and meeting with a guest in the comfort of their home. The reason why this person couldn't come in was they just didn't want to leave their guinea pigs. And so I wanted to make sure to honor that piece because that's her support. So then I went, to her home to provide her with support. So we try to get creative and innovative in every way that we can. So yes, just wanted to add that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This does conclude today's session. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation and for everyone attending. Have a great day.